listening to A Rogue State of Mind, formerly known as MitoLife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn. This is episode 306, getting back into the swing of things, kicking off 2025 with a pet episode, specifically on cat health. It's funny because at the end of last year, my final Instagram post of the year, I didn't do any signing off post or reflective post. It was just a rebuttal to the Toxoplasma gondii argument that's often made by health influencers that shouldn't have a microphone. So I completely deconstructed that sensationalized argument that if you have a cat, you're going to get a mind-controlling parasite. And it's only fitting that the first show is on cat health. And if you keep your cat healthy, and obviously yourself healthy, then you never have to worry about getting an infection. And I touch on this briefly with the guest today, Dr. Katie Woodley, also known as the natural pet doctor. I was trying to focus on both dogs and cats in this episode, but because we both have cats and it seems like she mostly does episodes on dog health because that's probably more popular. And Dr. Katie really rocked my world after this conversation. And actually during the conversation, alarm bells were going off in my brain. So quick story, I have two black cats. The younger one named Lava is a male, and male cats can be prone to kidney stones. And so I talk about that a few times in the show with her. But I didn't realize that I was getting scared by the vet to have them on prescription food for life. And so there's a lot of focus in this show on nutrition and diet, which is really important because I knew deep down that kibble wasn't optimal, but unless you're home 24/7, it's really difficult to only feed raw. But then she offered some amazing tips on that, as far as not having an all-you-can-eat all-day buffet for your cats and having scheduled eating times. There's just so many great tips in this show that you've probably never heard before. So enjoy the episode. Here is Dr. Katie Woodley. All right, Dr. Katie, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Matt. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this one. Our mutual friend, Vanessa, I've been on her podcast. I found you through her, and I really like the information that you're putting out there about pet health. And I'm really passionate about cats, and I love all animals. There's several dogs on the mountain that run around, and there just seems to be, I feel like a lacking of information, especially in the natural health community around pet health. People ask me, all the time on social media, what food are you feeding your cats? And there's just so much ignorance out there about, options, basically, which is what I try to provide on the human front. So excited to talk about the animal side of things. And I guess before we jump in, how did you get started with pet health and studying it?
Yeah, great question. So I think I was meant to become a veterinarian. I love the science side of things. I grew up, my mom was a nurse practitioner. She always attracted the animals too. So all the stray cats and things would end up on our doorstep. And so, I was really obsessed with the animals. They always, it's just one of those things. I'd be with the animals versus playing with the kids kind of thing. And so I ended up going to vet school just because I did resonate more with that, kind of exploring both of those sides of things. And I ended up going to vet school in New Zealand. So New Zealand's accredited just like it would be if I went to Colorado State University, just in a really awesome place. So got to explore the world and achieve becoming a veterinarian. And I ended up living there and working there for a couple of years afterwards too. Met my future husband there, and who was a Kiwi. So he native to New Zealand, not the flightless bird. And a few years after being there, we decided to move back to the States. And 6 months after we moved back, my husband actually developed an autoimmune disease, so inflammatory bowel disease. And that was kind of when it was the wake up call for us. I've always been more holistic minded. I did like a special interest course in vet school because I knew I'd eventually come back to the States. And it was very fascinating to me. I wanted to learn more. I knew people would ask about it. And we've always lived a very clean lifestyle, eating clean. We lived on a lifestyle property, raised chickens, had our sheep, lambs, all the things. And it was just really scary, though, when we were being told by the gastroenterologist, like, this is it. There's really nothing we can do. Food doesn't matter, which blew my mind. And then, of course, there's really strong immunosuppressive drugs that we're going to have to use. And a lot of times they don't really work. And so it was one of those things where I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. And so I went down, the Google rabbit hole and found this whole world of medicine that I knew was kind of there. I just didn't have knowledge around it. And really explored that and found so many different ways to support his health that didn't involve immunosuppressive drugs. And then, of course, I had the realization too, here I am as a veterinarian telling my clients that there's nothing else you can do when we get to the end of conventional medicine not working for like end stage cancer, autoimmune conditions, and things like that. And that was not okay with me. And so I ended up becoming acupuncture certified, Chinese herbal medicine certified, food therapy certified, all the things, and just kept learning and growing that knowledge because I vowed to myself I would never say, there's nothing you can do to my clients ever again. And so I ended up really implementing that. I've changed jobs a few times and came to the realization that I really love what I do from the holistic side. And so I created my own business, The Natural Pet Doctor, because I wanted to focus solely on that integrative, holistic approach to health and really support people. And there was such a big need for it. So started my own house call business. COVID hit the next year. That was fantastic. Creating resilience and how creative we can get, shifted online. That was amazing. So blessed because I absolutely love teaching and we can impact more pet parents across the world, and ended up really creating a different way of supporting pet parents. And now I really focus on gut and skin health issues and helping people find and heal the root cause of their pets' health issues so that way we get them back to optimal health again, while educating them too about how to do it, which is a big passion of mine also. So that's kind of me in a nutshell over the past like 15 years of my life that led me to this beautiful path.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's funny you say the gut and skin health stuff because I'm kind of like the unofficial, non-certified doctor of the mountain up here because I have several people working. And I was just talking to my friend Andrea last night, and she's dealing with gut issues, and we're talking about the gut skin connection and how she'll get super itchy and how stress exacerbates it. And I was raised with acne and eczema, and my mom, we had aloe vera down in SoCal, and so she would chop aloe vera and rub the gel on the leaf just directly on my inner arm and stuff, and that helped a lot. And it wasn't until I changed my nutrition that the eczema and acne subsided. Even just eating like more fruits and vegetables seemed to really help. I don't know if it was the enzymes or the phytonutrients or whatever. And also just lowering stress seemed to be the big one for me. I know stress really hits the gut and the skin. I would imagine it's the same for cats and dogs, right?
It is. And like no one talks about like the emotional health side of things. And it's huge. Like, I mean, the world's a crazy place and people are just not aware of how big of an impact it is, right? Creating leaky gut by itself. We don't need anything else other than stress. And our pets will actually feel that energy. It doesn't mean we create their health issues, but when we become aware of it and we support ourselves better, we actually support our pets better. And a lot of times those like gut problems go away. They don't have those horrible like itchy flare-ups too with, atopic dermatitis and allergies. And that's a huge thing. And just people just aren't aware because they're not being told it because we're not taught it in vet school.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you had chickens and sheep, and I have currently like 11 hens and a rooster.
Love it.
And I've had them for years. The roosters survived like 2 or 3 battles with birds of prey. I think we have like falcons up here and like crazy stuff. I've seen some wild stuff, and they're pretty amazing animals. And I've had goats. I had 2 does and a buck, and and even back in the day, exotic animals, piranha, tarantula, snakes. I mean,
Yeah.
but do you mostly specialize
Yeah.
in cats
Dogs
and
and cats.
dogs? Okay.
Yeah. So that was more of like my lifestyle property days in New Zealand, for like medical advice and things. Dogs and cats are my jam. So I can go back there. I just have to get more aware of like, I'd have to dig out the books and then go into the Google rabbit hole of holistic stuff for like all the exotics and other animals, right? Because they're not the
Yeah.
same. But
Yeah.
yeah, dogs and cats are where I focus. And I love that you brought up cats too. I think we share a special interest in collecting black cats, it sounds like. But I have 3 of them myself, and cats aren't talked about enough either. So I love that we're also going to talk about cats too, because no one really mentions cats. They're not small dogs, and we have to treat them very differently. And their needs are also very different from dogs too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's weird. You probably noticed it over the years, this obsession with Toxoplasma gondii, however
Yeah.
you pronounce it. And I made a reel that ended up going viral because I just did a rebuttal because I just got
Yep.
tired of the crap.
Yeah, literally, right?
Yeah. Well, it creates this stigma or this judgment
Yeah.
around cats, and they shouldn't be in your bedroom or on your bed, and all this
Yeah.
fear that you're going to get this mind controlling parasite that makes you more promiscuous was the thing I responded to, and all these weird claims that's just
Yeah.
nuts. I mean, we're not diving into our litter box and rubbing our face in it.
Hopefully not. There might be some people, but they're probably not listening to this podcast if they are. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's really frustrating. And it's also like a big piece too with a lot of the myths that are out there around like feeding and species appropriate diets too. Like the whole raw food myth around like parasites and bacteria, it's this myth that will not go away in our profession. And it keeps coming up, and it keeps people in that state of fear, right? Where they're afraid to move forward and implement these things for their pets that are actually going to benefit their health too. So, I agree with you. Like parasites, we have to look at like the whole picture. They don't just come from one thing. And like, yes, a cat can be a host of that parasite, but there's other areas. And also too, the big thing for me is I always ask, whenever we're looking at something like creating disease, like this parasite or, I'm going to go there, but even like vaccines, right? My question is, what can you do to support your like pet's health so that way we can minimize them actually getting sick, right? That's not talked about, that like proactive approach of like, what is true health and how do you optimize that? And like the foundations are definitely being missed for our pets and also ourselves, as you are very well aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. My youngest black cat Lava, I recently had a really bad scare. It was I think 2 months ago, right before I moved to this mountain, and he wasn't peeing for the whole morning and potentially overnight. And he just looked scared. He was walking all around my cabin trying to pee.
Yeah.
And some of my friends were like, just do homeopathy, or like, like it's not that bad. And then a lot of people were like, take him to the vet immediately. He could die. And so I went with that option, and went to an awesome vet, and they massaged the bladder. And he's like, we're going to have to keep him overnight. And then as soon as the vet said that, Lava peed across the room.
that is common.
Yeah.
You're like, no, thanks. I'll take care of this myself. Oh,
yeah. And then
that's scary.
It is. Yeah. Then the 2 girls did the x-ray, and they were laughing at him because he's just such a character. He was like on his back, just like looking crazy. And like, he's like, I haven't, what's going on? And they didn't find any kidney stones, but they gave him a shot because they found a UTI, urinary tract infection. And thinking back, I mean, that's the first shot he's had. And I mean, probably since he was born, because I'm probably like you, where I try to avoid shots if I can, in both myself and animals. So I think there's alternatives.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, your urinary tract stuff is really common in cats, and male cats. The problem is that their urethra is smaller, right? It's thinner. So if there's any spasming, or if we get any like grit from like a urinary tract infection or crystals or debris, it can easily block. And so it is one of those things. I do think it is an emergency. There are like alternatives and herbs and stuff, the homeopathies that you can try. But at the end of the day, you think about like if you can't pee and you're pushing, they can put pressure on the kidney. So it's always good to take them in. And I'm really grateful he didn't have to stay or get catheterized or anything like that too. And it's good too. They also checked for a urinary tract infection too. So, because sometimes people won't check those things, which always blows my mind. And then you kind of get stuck and you're not figuring out like why.
Yeah.
But also too, like for urinary tract infections, a lot of times it can come down to the diet. Moisture levels are a really big, important piece too. And then also stressors. And I know you had some questions too about like, how do we help support them and enrich their lives, which is a huge piece to that too. So, it's good that he's rebounded. Hopefully he's doing better. But there's a lot of elements that we can do to help support them and hopefully prevent that from happening in the future too, which is great.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny at the vet, they always recommend the major. And my first
The
job
prescription
was
diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My first job
for
was
the rest
overnight.
of his life, by the way.
Exactly. It's
Yeah,
nuts.
you're going to feed him kibble and you're like, doesn't he need moisture? This doesn't make sense, right?
Well, yeah, so many things I want to talk about and ask you. So it's tricky. Like when I've adopted, I always adopt the two cats. Adopted them, and one was at a local shelter up here, Lava, and I'm sure he was started on kibble. I think when they're at the shelter, that's all.
Yeah.
But if you have a brand new kitten or puppy, I mean, same thing. And I used to have a German Shepherd that didn't last long. That was really stressful. A puppy, but it's easier to. Am I wrong here? Is it easier to start them from day one, week one on raw? Because if they've gotten kind of addicted or started on kibble and conventional pet food, it's really difficult to switch them to raw, right? Because I've tried with my cats and they just will not have it.
Yeah. Cats, I love cats and, they're just such a unique beast, right? Like they keep you on your toes and they're all so unique. And I mean, dogs are too, don't get me wrong, but cats really like make you get creative with how you have to support them. And you're 100% right. As soon as they start eating, like they're able to eat solids. So hopefully they're, with the bitch, the mother, and they're getting good colostrum and milk. And hopefully they're like eating good nutrition too. Ideal world, right? That they're on a raw food diet. Then what you do is start day one. Now, cats are a little bit different than dogs in this regard, where they can actually get addicted to certain preferences, to textures. And that's where like the kibble addiction is a true real thing. And it's frustrating because it does make it really hard to transition some cats. I experienced this with my senior cat that we rescued right after we lost my dog over COVID. And she's 10 years old, eaten kibble her whole life. And she will like nibble raw, but she doesn't get enough where I can feed that to her. So I have to get creative. We use canned, we use freeze dried, even dry, which people are like, don't do that. But she gets moisture in other areas. And I know it's a better quality than say kibble. So there's ways around it too, to try to transition them where we have to get creative of, trying different textures. So sometimes like chunks, cats will like that. Sometimes they'll like the ground up piece, like the really like minced type of like raw protein choices, brands. I mean, and their preference can change the next day too. Like you probably experience like throwing tons of food out, like, I mean, you might be able to feed the wildlife out where you are at least with it, but it can be really frustrating and it can be like a lot of like food that is wasted. But one of the things that can be helpful too with the transition from like a kibble addicted cat is to try freeze dried dry, because it will be like a consistency like kibble. So you start with that, you offer both, and then hopefully they start eating that more, and then you decrease your kibble. We never want to starve a cat. That's really important. Dogs can fast, cats cannot. So we don't want to go longer than 24 hours. Typically, it'll take 72 hours without food before we start getting like fatty liver disease. Dogs are a bit different than cats in that regards. They can fast for much longer and they're not going to develop fatty liver. And so with the cats, we want to make sure we're not all day buffet. That's the other thing too, right? They have set meal times, so they're getting hungry also. So we don't just want to leave kibble down, but provide other alternatives. You can even sprinkle kibble on top of, say, if you're trying a canned food, at least for more moisture, especially with like urinary problems too, because moisture is the key. We need the moisture to flush that bladder. If there's any sediment or crystals, moisture is like the number one thing. And then also, too, if there's any like superfood toppers they like, some cats will really like canned sardines. Those can be helpful to put a little bit on top of the food to entice them. Some cats like bone broth, some cats like goat's milk. Just depends on the cat. My cat's like neither. So, one of those things you just have to try different things, but slowly transitioning them over, but making sure that you have set feeding times for them too. If you like, for people listening or Matt yourself, if we're leaving kibble down all the time, they just get used to that and it makes it so much harder to transition them too.
Well, that's one thing I'm doing wrong. Yeah, I spoil them. And so they have access.
Well, I mean,
24.
they're all spoiled. Yeah, like all day buffet happening.
Yeah.
It's hard though, because the thing is too is, and I don't know if your cats do this, is if they're used to that and you work at home and you're at home too, like they will come and like tell you they're not happy, right? So it can be hard. And this could be something where potentially if you start doing that transition to feeding them, like 3 times a day and they're getting smaller amounts. So you're kind of mimicking like how they would hunt in the wild. When you think about it, like they're going to go out and eat a mouse and then they're going to catch another mouse. So like they're getting like these little snacks throughout the day. They might get a big rabbit. Tico, my cat, prefers rabbits if he can.
Oh, yeah.
So they're like his favorite. And I'm like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
But it's wild, right? Like this is what they're bred for. And so the other thing too is, we can go really deep on like the prey model and all the things there too, because some cats won't eat like the processed raw. They want like the actual like kind of like the real thing. And there's options for that too. So I don't know if your cats, if you've tried that with them to see if they'll eat some of the like the actual like frozen prey. Obviously I don't encourage like giving them the live animal just for humane purposes, right? Even though they would actually prefer it, but it's one of those things like there's so many different options that we now have to try with our cats to help with that transition, but definitely start with breaking down the meals and then maybe get some freeze dried and you can offer that as a snack. So they're like, ooh, I actually really like that flavor. And then you can start removing some of the kibble, replace it with the freeze dried and then go from there. And that might help with the transition. And at least freeze dried is less carbs than your kibble diet.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I never even considered what you mentioned as the prey model because when it's spring and summer, living up here in the mountains, it's just, Lava, he just, he brings them in.
Like, I don't need to eat.
Yeah, he bats them around, plays with them all night long, keeps me up, they'll run behind appliances. And Lyra, she's like yours, it sounds like. She'll decapitate rabbits. Here, Dad, here's the head,
Yeah, you're like, thanks. Yeah. My cats used to do that in New Zealand. So they were like indoor, outdoor. There were no predators. My one cat here, we have bald eagles and like hawks and stuff. And also too, just like we have stupid people in our neighborhood. They shoot like animals, like with like, there's like stories of seeing animals with like arrows. And I'm like, I'm not for this and we're not going to participate. So we have restricted outdoor time together where I monitor him, of course, because he was an outdoor cat, but there's sometimes bunnies that come in and it's like, oh, okay, that was stupid. He's fast. So, sometimes things happen. But that's one of the things. That's what they're bred to do. That's why they enjoy it. And also, too, they're showing you the other tip, too, with transition is they play with their food, right? They love it. So what you also want to do when you're trying to transition is into environmental enrichment is play with them beforehand. Like, so you're actually stimulating that prey, that prey drive. So they're going to get hungrier and then you're feeding them, you're rewarding them like you would if they actually went out and hunted. So that's another really helpful tip is like, if they like the feather toys or whatever toy they like, play with them for a little bit before you feed them, get them really like worked up and excited and then offer them the food.
Interesting. Yeah. It's great tips. And last thing on the UTI stuff, because I know there's magnesium struvite, right? And calcium.
Yeah, your struvite is more common in cats, definitely, where your pH is higher.
Okay.
Yep.
So the prescription food, I mean, are they adding some type of compound or chemical that
Methionine is what they're adding to.
methionine? Okay.
Hmm. Yep.
Okay.
And then they also add salt. So your cat wants to drink more.
Uh,
Yeah. So they're
okay.
manipulating it. So yeah, it can potentially help. Here, the problem with prescription diets, well, I mean, there's numerous problems,
Yeah.
but they're not actually, there's no research long term over the effects with them. They're not meant to be fed long term.
Okay.
And what's happening is cats and dogs are being put on them for the rest of their life. So what can happen is, right, is that this is potentially not a balanced diet, or it's not researched to see what's the long-term effect. We can end up with vitamin, mineral, nutrient deficiencies over time. And then also too, it's a processed diet. So kibble has to be over 50% carbohydrates. For cats specifically, they're obligate carnivores. Dogs and cats have zero physiological requirement for carbs.
Mhm.
So this is the problem with feeding these high carb diets, is that we're setting them up for insulin resistance. There's going to be more inflammation. These foods are cooked at really high heat temperatures. And so, they have all sorts of oxidative stress. We're not feeding the proper bacteria in their gut health and their microbiome. And that microbiome in the gut is also closely connected to the microbiome in the bladder. So that's the other piece too, is that if we get stuck with lots of UTIs, I'm always asking, well, what's going on elsewhere, especially in the microbiome in the gut and the immune system, right? And a lot of times it can come down to just how do we optimize this diet so we're actually benefiting the microbes in the body that are so beneficial, right?
Wow. Yeah, you're making me want to drive to I have a really good pet store near me, surprisingly, that has huge selection of freeze-dried
Awesome.
raw, both fridge and
Yeah.
just on the shelf.
Oh, cool.
Because I was doing the Royal Canin, which I thought was better than
Yeah.
Science and all the, it's one of the better ones, I think. But then someone on Instagram told me about Song, which I think has been around for
Hmm.
years. And so I
Yeah.
switched to the urinary wet food, and I was really happy that he enjoyed it.
Yeah.
um, but now both of mine, even the female and the male, are both on the Royal Canin dry kibble as their
Mm.
main stuff, which I feel like from talking to you, that's the one thing I should switch immediately and try. Basically, I
Yeah.
think one of the questions I had for you is, favorite brands, but you probably get that asked all the time. And I would imagine you respond, try different ones because, like you said, they're going to be
Yeah,
picky. So,
cats. Yeah, with cats are harder than dogs, right? So the good thing is, so one of the great resources I do recommend, and I purchase it every year too as a veterinarian, is The List from Susan Thixton.
okay.
So what she does, she's all about, she's not a veterinarian, but she is into the pet food industry and exposing all things bad with the pet food industry. So what she does is she actually vets companies every single year, and they go through this crazy application process. She is very strict. She will take no money. She won't even go out to lunch or dinner with these people. Like, she is very non-biased, and she creates a list every year of the brands she recommends, and it's very comprehensive. So that list is all, I think it's like $11 to like purchase it, to like support her and like the work that she's doing. So I highly recommend that for every single like pet parent. There'll be brands that include both dog and cat food. So that's something to take a look at. And then the biggest thing that I find, and now keep in mind too, some brands that aren't on there doesn't mean that they're bad, right? Just like everything, there's all sorts of things that come with everything. So some of the brands, though, I would say, like, especially with you dealing with urinary stuff, canned food will be better than kibble
Mhm.
because of the moisture. So even like really poor quality canned food will be better than kibble. So even, it seems crazy, but the moisture is like the number one thing. And also, to your canned food will typically, not always with some of the poor quality, but it'll be higher protein too. So cats need protein. And this is the big problem with a lot of those prescription diets, is they actually put them onto a low protein diet, and cats start like muscle wasting, and it's really bad. So that would be the biggest thing, is try different brands of canned food. Don't stock up on one. Like, I do this too with my own cats. I have multiple brands of different types of food, different canned foods, different freeze-dried brands. And then I also have different brands of raw, and I rotate. So if I start noticing like my cats prefer like raw rabbit, that's their like number one protein that they really like. So I have more of that, obviously. But sometimes I'll rotate in like chicken or turkey or beef. They're not big fans of like beef and lamb and venison, which makes sense kind of, right? Like they're not taking down the cow in the field. Maybe their ancestors, their bigger ancestors, right? But that's, it's one of those things, each cat will have their own preferences. So have a little bit of, different brands to help you with that, because it is frustrating and it can change too. And so I also use freeze-dried toppers. So like freeze-dried chicken, I will use and sprinkle on top, and that helps encourage. You can get freeze-dried like fish, minnows, herring, all those things. You can, figure that out, see what they prefer. One of my cats loves freeze-dried green lip mussels. So that's a great source of omega-3s too. So try those things and see how they go. Your biggest thing, if you're using freeze-dried raw dry, try to get them transitioned over to that and then see how you go with adding moisture. Key thing. And then see from there, can we get them to a raw food diet, and you sprinkle the freeze-dried that they like on top of that. So you're like using the things that they like to get them over to hopefully a more species appropriate diet. And it's just a game and a challenge, right? So life wasn't meant to be easy, right? Cats prove that every day, and I love them for it.
Those are awesome tips. Yeah. And I would imagine that if they're indoor, outdoor, it makes it easier because half the year they're getting the species appropriate optimal diet.
Yeah,
right?
Your cats are eating things outside. I'd be surprised if they weren't, right? You're seeing it. So it's just the natural instincts and the behavior of the cat. So that's the beautiful thing that you have going for their situation, is that that they're actually eating what they are meant to eat. So
yeah. And the predator thing is tough. Like because I've been in the mountains for, I guess, 5 years now. And the tricks that I've found are basically, keep up enough tall trees. And both my cats I've seen them scale trees super high and get down. And so as far as running away from wolves and coyotes, having trees around helps. But I also do like the little blinking red LEDs, or like predator eyes. And surprisingly, those work. Like it's just a little solar charged. They're on Amazon, and they mimic, I guess, predator eyes reflecting back. And I've seen like wolf or coyote poop, away, but they won't get close to those lights, and you just drill them into trees facing out.
Oh, so, cool. That's a really cool tip. I didn't know that. That makes sense.
The birds of prey are probably the scariest because they can just swoop down really quick. But I think just having things they could duck under if there's big open areas. And to me, I think the risk is worth it. I mean, I really hope that they stay safe, but I'd rather risk it and have them go outside. And I know people do catios, and those can get so expensive.
It's that, it's a huge controversial thing, right? Like in New Zealand, the big thing was like the bird population. And so everyone was like, the cats are bad, get rid of the cats. That was a thing that they were like talking about. And I was like, whoa, this is extreme. And so, yes, they are predators, right? But there are other things killing the bird population, like possums in New Zealand. Like, why aren't we focusing on this? So there's a risk also too of like, someone has to be okay that something might happen to their cat if they're doing indoor, outdoor. My 3 cats, Tico has to go outside. If we don't take him out, he is not happy. He gets depressed. He sits at our door. He has the loudest, deepest, like, meow. And it's like, oh my God. I'll talk on the phone with someone and they're like, is your cat okay? And I'm like, he just wants to go outside. But that's really important, because once again, it's that balance of going outside, that enrichment, touching the soil. He'll chew on like grasses and plants and things like, he looks for the mice and things like that. It's really engaging for him. My other 2 cats who have been rescues, so they've never had experience like outdoor time in life. One of them has cerebellar hypoplasia, so he's a bit wonky with his walking and stuff. And he has zero desire. I'll take him out and he's like terrified. And I'm like, oh, it's okay, buddy. Like, you're happy. You're like homebody. That's fine. We'll play with you inside. And then my senior cat, she's the same way. She's like skittish, kind of fearful. She prefers to like, be under things, she loves to hang out with me just as long as it's not outside. So once again, seeing what works for your cat, analyzing like, is this more stressful to them or is it like helpful for them? Because like I said, my cats, they're all very different. But I also, my previous two cats in New Zealand, they lived a freaking awesome life in New Zealand. They loved it. So it's one of those things like, and they probably killed a lot of birds. Sorry, New Zealand. You know,
I'm sure there are safer areas in the country. Like my friend that does graphics for my company, he just was here for a week from Hawaii, and
yeah.
he said that's just like cat paradise because they have zero predators. Where he's
That's how New Zealand is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would, but here's the thing too. So just like personal story, when we moved back to the States, Stanley, my one cat, went missing. He didn't come home. And I was like, oh no, like, where is he? Is he trapped in someone's like, I mean, we had farms around us and I would wander the farm land and like calling his name. And I'm like, buddy, we literally are leaving the house like in 2 days to like leave the country. And so it was one of those things that was really stressful for me. And so, like I said before, we have to be okay if we do that thing that like something might happen like that. I would have obviously had a lot of trauma therapy from that I would have needed, but it's one of those things like I look at their, you know, I think it was like 7 years of their life was amazing. So the benefit would have outweighed just keeping them trapped inside.
Yeah.
Like it's the stress. And so there's pros and cons to everything in life. And cats, the enrichment and the engagement, it's one of those things people have to kind of weigh up for themselves, what's best for them. And if they don't go outside, you have to make sure that you are enriching their life indoors. That's really, really key. They can't just lay there and sleep, you know, like they will if they're bored and sad and depressed. That's not a normal, like healthy, happy cat if they're just sleeping all day. That's the reality. As my cat sleeping behind me. sleeping a little is fine. Don't worry. You got to play with them is my point.
Well, it helps to have two because they, boy and girl, they just always play together and wrestle and
depends. You know, it depends. My senior cat who we got first before we ended up getting this one, Moki, and then Tika was an unexpected third that my parents rescued and we took on because they couldn't keep him. Kiwi would have loved to be a single cat. Oh. She was actually really mad. So every day she's like, Katie, I hate you. Like, but I still love you. But why did you bring them in? She like screams at them and runs from them, but like super playful with us. You know, I just have to play with her by herself, but she hates them. Like, so it's one of the cats are cats, right? Like that's the beautiful thing. I always say it over and over again, just because they're so different. But it's one of those things like sometimes it is good to get a second cat and it works out really, really well. I like having two cats. I ended up with 3. My husband said no more. So here we are.
Recently, I got like it's a company, Catastrophic Creations. I'm not an affiliate. I don't know, saw an ad or something. And they basically sell like really aesthetic for like cabin, like bridges, different length bridges and ledges and beds and hammocks, like different things that. So I did like half my cabin along the ceiling, and my youngest loves it. I kind of enticed him to get up there with treats, and they seem to like being high up. So to observe everything and probably reduces the stress too. So
100%.
They've been liking that.
Yeah, I love that stuff. We have to be careful because our cerebellar hypoplasia cat's wobbly and he doesn't know that he has physical limitations. He's he's like Superman, but doesn't fly very well. And so he loves being up high, but he like shoots up. And that's the thing, having different levels for your cats are really helpful because each cat will, like, you can kind of see in my beautiful office here, like we have a cat tower and one of the cats like staying underneath, kind of low and hidden. And then the others like to go above. So those different levels are a great enrichment source. And also too, running, they can look out. Probably I can see behind you like beautiful windows looking out, right? So they can see what's happening. They can survey, they feel safe. Those are all really good enrichment tools. Having things to also scratch on is really, really key too. So scratching posts or things on the wall, those we have to help mimic the natural environment for what they should be living in, right? Because if we don't, they get bored, they get stressed, then they get sick.
Yeah. I was trying to make this like a dog and a cat, but I like
I
that
know
we're
we're going
talking a
like
lot.
cat.
It's probably rare because I'd imagine most podcasts are dog health, but I'll sprinkle in a little bit dog
You'll make
stuff.
me say dog
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, on this topic or theme, like I've been into health since 2010, and I found this overlap. Obviously, the same thing. People even give pets human supplements, and those can be helpful.
Yep.
But I sell grounding sheets. I've been grounding indoors, like while I sleep since 2010, I think. Like the silver embedded, and you could do ideally rod to earth or the third prong in the outlet, but ideally it's out the window, rod in the
Yep.
ground, and you get the negatively charged electrons. And I've actually given them out to people in the area that, my male guy, his dog had it was limping. And I said, well, try a grounding sheet,
Yeah.
in addition to supplements and certain things.
Yep.
And I've seen, I've been into red light therapy for about that.
Yep.
Well, maybe, I don't know. Yeah. 2014 or something. And I've seen cats and dogs gravitate to the red light panels. And
Yeah.
those are a few things that people could use, right, to help to start to mimic the natural environment, or at least give them those inputs.
100%. Yeah. I think that's, those tools are really awesome. A lot of my clients use those types of tools and they're so easy to use, right? Like you're not forcing something on them, because sometimes it can create more stress with having to give like supplements or medications, right? Especially with cats. So, dogs can be a little bit easier in that category, but there's a lot of the same things that we use for ourselves kind of in this like more integrative longevity world, right? And that we can actually apply to our pets too. So it's interesting because I use a lot of like peptides too with like pets also. So especially with like inflammation, acid reflux, leaky gut issues too, which have been really, really helpful. But there's a lot of different ways to approach health, which is wonderful, right? So you can layer on these like I don't call them treatments, but layer on like the support essentially, right? So depending on what your pet is going to tolerate or handle, layering these things on and seeing what works best for them and what works best for the pet parent is really handy.
Are you using oral peptides like powders and stuff?
Yeah, I don't use injectables just because it can create a lot of stress for people having to like inject their pets. And I work with a lot of pet parents like globally, so like telehealth and things like that. So their vets also too aren't kind of aware of the things. So they're like, I don't know what this is and maybe against it, right? So this is where like oral peptides can be really, really helpful. So I use, certain companies, obviously, too. There's a lot of really poor quality, just like as you're very well aware with supplementation. So, but it can be really helpful because it just kind of mitigates some of the stress. So you don't need as many supplements going into your pet to help them heal. And you can use different types of peptides too, to really, depending on what we're trying to do. Obviously, I work with a lot of gut health problems. So like BPC 157 is a big one that I use for those animals. And they tolerate it really, really well, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Maybe I'll try that with lava with the urinary stuff and see, just put some on his food. And
yeah, definitely. Even looking at what's really neat too. So you have your peptides and you have your bioregulators, right? I know we're kind of going into a hole here. But they have like bladder bioregulators too to help. So it's just a nice way to use something short term because, you pulse it and sometimes you don't need more of it. Like you fix the thing and then you optimize the foundation. So while you're adjusting diet, you help with like making the body stronger, supporting that immune system, calming down inflammation. If there's biofilms too, like KPV is one that will help with that. So you can combine different like peptides to help with those different areas depending on what you're looking for. And then you give it for like, a month, take a break, give it another month, take a break, 3 months, see how they're doing, stay off of it. And then if you need to repeat it, you can continue it.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. I wanted to circle back to parasites because I think I brought up toxoplasma at the beginning, and we talked about indoor, outdoor, and whether cats or dogs. I mean, I've seen when I used to have the German Shepherd who was on a walk and he went went number 2, and it looked like spaghetti coming out. It was
Yeah.
the grossest thing I'd ever I remember seeing with my
Roundworms
own
or
eyes.
something.
Yeah. And they were all live, and they were just, I
Yes,
was like,
right,
wow, this
right.
is,
Like
yeah.
a horror movie, right?
Yeah. And yeah, Lyra, my oldest female, she had worms for years, and I was trying to heal it with Royal Rife frequency. I'm into energy medicine, so I had
Yeah.
Rife machines, that a really advanced one, really powerful resonant light company, expensive, and I would just put that by her cat tower and just run it for hours on the general comprehensive 2-hour parasite program. And they were basically just little white. They almost looked like rice, like
They're
around her butt. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was around
tapers.
her butt for like a year. And I was just like, whatever, the Rife frequencies will eventually knock it out. And eventually, yeah, ended up deworming her with just at a Petco or PetSmart. They're
Like
off
a
the
draw
shelf.
tool. Yeah.
I think, yeah, hidden in the little green pocket thing, whatever that is, the little treat
Yep.
thing, pill hider.
Yep. The
And
pill
then
pocket.
knocked it out. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of, this is where, I'm not against drugs when they're needed, right? When they're used appropriately. There's a time of like what you found with the UTI and the bladder like blockage. Like there's a time and a place. And parasites can, especially if you have a big burden of parasites, it can be really hard with some of our natural tools to like knock things out. So this is where like using some of those conventional dewormers is needed. And then this is also where, too, though, looking at, okay, is there something off in the gut that I need to adjust? And this is where we have a lot of really cool functional medicine tests now that are coming out for pets to actually see, do we have leaky gut? Do we have dysbiosis in the microbiome? Do we have a problem with the local immune system too? So that's the thing. Are we actually inactivating or, helping to clear these infections? So that's something when we deworm, I like to check some of those functional medicine tests to see, is there actually an underlying issue here that allows these parasites to set up house? So then that
it,
way we can focus on fixing it, right? And hopefully preventing it or making it harder for the parasites to come and like stay the next time they get exposed.
yeah, that's really interesting. Is that like a GI stool map for cats and dogs,
Yeah,
essentially?
kind of. Yeah. So what's really cool is there's a company, Innovative Pet Lab, that came from Genova. And then they saw a space where there's like, we don't have any of the stuff that we have on the human health side, which blows my mind, right? It doesn't make any sense. So they're like, let's create that. And so what's really cool is that now we have reference ranges, which makes it easier and more helpful. But they have tests that look at like calprotectin, secretory IgA, look at a lot of different other biomarkers in the stool. And then there's also a microbiome test too, a stool test. Obviously, with microbiome tests, you always have to take them with a grain of salt, right? So, but it's at least better than nothing. And it can be
Yeah.
quite helpful too to see, are we like at zero and lack diversity? Do we have an overgrowth of like E. coli or other pathogenic bacteria, and go from there?
This is wild. Yeah, I pulled it up. Comprehensive gut
Yeah.
check for cats, $250. What would I do if my two share like a litter robot, like they share the litter box? Would you
Yeah.
just
So this,
use?
you have to watch them. You might have to use a normal litter tray too. I don't know how that, because it cleans it right away, right?
Yeah, it
It
dumps it in the
senses them.
bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you see one go, because you can still collect the stool from that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to watch them closely. At least you only
Okay.
have two. I had to do this with three. It was a nightmare. So if you see them go, you just collect the stool and then you'd use that. So, but it's really easy. You just collect the stool,
Wow.
you send it off, they run it, and then they send you a report with what's off. It's really helpful.
Wow. And then from there, you can make dietary changes or
Correct. Yep.
strategically use probiotics or something, or
Correct. So that test there's not a microbiome test. So they're not testing specific like bacteria. It's more of like a functional medicine, like how the gut is working, like the local immune system. So this would be interesting for you too, like the kibble. There's anti-gliadin A, which is going to see, are we sensitive to gluten? So that would be a really interesting one too, because a lot of pets will come back positive to it, which we don't want, right? It's like an autoimmune response. But we don't have calprotectin, which is the inflammation marker, elevated. So we're not at a place yet where the body's like, uh-oh, I'm inflamed now, but we're like,
Yeah.
the immune system's not happy. It's reacting to the food that we're feeding. So we know, okay, we really need to like get them off this food, right? And then there's also zonulin, which is the marker for leaky gut too. So you can see like,
Yeah.
is my pet potentially like if we have leaky gut, then we're more likely to have things that are gonna like the skin issues, right? The gut skin
Mhm.
axis. So that's where allergies come into play, food sensitivities. We might have also more inflammation elsewhere in the body, like the bladder, right? If we have elevated inflammation, the immune system's in disarray, behavior issues because of the gut brain
Wow.
axis. So that test is really helpful to see, do I need to really work on leaky gut, getting inflammation down? And then also too, it looks at digestion. So
Hmm.
if we're lacking the ability to produce certain digestive enzymes from the pancreas, we can actually then add in digestive enzymes. I use a lot of digestive enzymes, especially
Cool.
with cats and dogs on kibble diets because they need help. They're not made to eat that high carb diet. So we can support that and help them, at least if we have to use it in the short term, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that was I've been taking them personally. So, I mean, I used to be raw vegan. I'm not anymore. So I got into enzyme therapy years ago, and I sell them. So I should start sprinkling my own
You should.
on the cat.
You should
Gotcha.
actually. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely use your enzymes
Yeah.
because it can make a huge difference for them. Because the other thing cats are really predisposed to, and dogs when they're on a
Mm.
high carb diet, is pancreatitis.
Uh,
Because that pancreas is working so much harder because they aren't geared towards a high carb diet. They don't produce the enzymes that we do as omnivores. So that digestive enzyme will take the pressure off of the pancreas and help.
that's awesome. Wow. So much good information here. Let's see other questions I had. Yeah. So, uh, do you like the automated litter boxes? I was just gonna ask you about that. Like, are they? I mean, I guess I've tried like four, but it's mainly for human convenience, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're mainly for human convenience. I've never personally used one, so I don't have personal experience around it. And now, like with my cat that has the CH condition, we have to use a box that's like higher. So, and like kind of it's bigger, it's higher. We have a like we've actually built our own litter box. Like we took the plastic like bin storage bins and then we cut like a hole for him to go in because he's just so wonky and we just have to make it
yeah.
easier for him. So that's a huge reason why I wouldn't even try it. The other thing too, I hear from people, and so once again, depends on your cat, is that sometimes they can be stressful to a cat because of the
Mm.
noise it makes like after, I think, right? Like it's kind of a noisy
It's like
thing.
a little
Like,
motor. Yeah.
yeah, like some
Yeah.
cats are sensitive to those
Uh,
types of things. So if you have like a stressy cat, I wouldn't recommend an automatic litter box just
mhm.
because of that. And also too, so many cats have elimination issues with like peeing and pooping outside the litter box that, if you have a stressy cat or you're worried about something like that, it could potentially create a problem like where they're peeing now elsewhere in your house. So it just sets up a problem there potentially. So they're not my first recommendation, but if it's working for you and your cats are doing fine, then I have no problem with them. But those would be
Mhm.
things I'd be looking at if someone's trying to make that decision on getting one or not.
Okay, cool. Yeah, they seem fascinated by it. They just watch it
Yeah,
as it's
yes.
spinning.
Yeah. So they're probably, I mean, a stressed cat's going to go and hide from it, like they're going to run away from it. And then also, too, they might be pooping and peeing elsewhere outside the litter box, too, if they don't want to use it or go near it. Those would be
Yeah.
signs like this is not working for them. So,
Mhm. How important are regular vet visits? Like, if or do you recommend pet owners, dog or cat, to just use tests like the Innovative Pet Lab? And if they're on top of all this and they're really educated, I guess a more targeted question: are vet visits like regular, checkups necessary?
yeah, great question. So, like on the human health side, which has gone into the trash can, just to put it simply, like you go into the doctor, they don't even do a physical exam,
Mhm.
right? Like you're like, why am I here? Doesn't make sense. So the vet side, the vet should still be doing a physical exam, like a full physical exam. The big thing also too is they're looking in the mouth. So dental disease is very common, especially after the age of 2. So dental disease can start very early in both dogs and cats, and it goes unmissed until like you have like a abscess bursting out of the cheek or they stop eating. So I do believe that once a year physical exams are really important, and also doing once a year like full blood work,
Mm,
because animals are so good at hiding disease that a lot of times, and I hear it every day, like they were fine until they weren't, right?
mm,
And it's like you're creeping towards an edge of a cliff and you have no idea. And then you fall off the cliff and now you got to climb back up and it's much harder. So that's where that proactive approach is very important. And two, I imagine a lot of your audience listening to this wants more of like an integrative approach, right? Not just
mhm,
like conventional. And so this is where, having a vet that at least is open to hearing the things that you want to do, maybe limiting the vaccines or doing vaccine titers and having that conversation with them. And if they're not on board with you, it's okay to go somewhere else. There are more vets that are coming on board with a more like integrative approach, but those are questions you want to ask before you get to the vet clinic, because
yeah,
then it just is really, really stressful. But definitely proactive approach if you have a senior pet. So this is typically like a dog after 7 years of age, cats, after 10, they tend to live a bit longer because they're smaller. Doesn't mean dogs can't live long time. They should when we holistically support them. You want to ideally be getting every 2 months, or sorry, not every 2 months. They're like, well, who is this girl? every 6 months. So ideally every 6 months visit. So that way you're getting a full physical exam. You're doing blood work at least once a year. If there's anything off like kidney disease, you're retesting that, because there are so many great ways that we can like mitigate and reduce and help heal, that you want to make sure what you're using is actually working and things aren't getting worse. Because once again, pets hide things, really stoic. And you don't want something to pop up like cancer or kidney disease, and then complement with these in-home tests that are now available. So you can do these at any time, which is great. So you can stay on top of like the deeper layers of health that blood work just can't show us, right? Blood work's
yeah,
like snapshot here and now.
yeah,
Great. It
yeah.
it's important. It gives us information, but that's where a lot of these functional medicine tests are so much more powerful, right? So it's the combination of all
Mm.
of them together.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I know a lot of vets can do mobile visits, right, and just come right
Yeah.
to your house. And
Yeah, that's what I did before COVID destroyed the world. So, so it's a lot of vets. There are mobile vets in a lot of areas. The other cool thing too is there's a company called Affordable Pet Lab in the U.S. They're expanding across the U.S. and they have technicians that come to your house to draw blood from your dogs and cats, and you can
oh,
order like annual wellness blood work from them. So, especially like with a lot of cats, it's stressful to go to the vet, right? With a
yeah,
cat, do you enjoy it? I don't. Like, I
yeah,
don't
it's
work at a traditional vet clinic anymore, so I have to take my cats in. It's not fun. They don't enjoy it. And so if you can do some of these tests outside of that, so if they're just going in and they're getting an exam, it's not as stressful to them too, which is really nice.
yeah, yeah. It's funny. My female, every move she meows like half the time, and then Lava he just curls up on my lap, and
Oh,
I let him both loose. But yeah,
yeah.
the constant meowing is pretty stressful.
Yeah, it's sad, right?
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, these are a lot of great resources.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. And yeah, that's the neat thing too, is when 10 years ago, we had none of this.
Yeah.
So it's great to see that vet world starting to catch up more with like the human health functional world. We still have a long way to go with like the amount of tests and things that are available on the human health side, but it's really nice to see that we have a lot more options.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Um, let's see. What are your thoughts on dogs and cats sleeping in the bed? Because it seems like people debate that, on the parasite thing. They're getting up in your face, and that's a good way for your cat or dog to infect you. Like I've had ex-girlfriends that made me lock my cats out of my door, which is really sad because Lava just cuddles
Why
on me.
you lock them out.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta sleep outside tonight. It's deal breaker.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so for me, like I kiss my cats on the head, and they lick my face and they eat raw food and they lick their butts, right? So it's one of those things, like my husband's not a fan of that. And that's it. I don't care. So he's used to me. So it's one of those things. I think every person will be different. Yes, they can carry parasites, but so can your partner or spouse you're sleeping with. We all have parasites inside of us. We probably do. Most of us do. And we're all living hopefully in a healthy ecosystem harmony, right? It's when things get out of balance that we see issues. So it's one of those things where, especially like you mentioned with lava, the amount of stress that would occur, like kicking that cat out, what are they going to do? Like, what would happen if you kick the cat out and they're outside your door? What are they going to do?
Get stressed.
Yeah. And they're going to claw at the door
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're going to meow, right? So now you're not getting sleep anyways. So it's one of those things where, obviously use good hygiene, keep your pets healthy, parasite test them. If you're concerned, so if you're super paranoid about parasites, do a stool test and check for parasites. Do it every quarter. You can get it from Affordable Pet Lab. They'll send the test kit to you. You can send it to the lab. You don't even have to go to the vet. So that's something where I have no issue with it. And it is what it is. If you have trouble sleeping, sleep is really important for your health too. So that is something, if they're constant, like your cats are having a parade on you every night, all night, it's like my cat jumps up, right? So you have to weigh that up, right? Your situation, just, be okay with the decision you make, but also too, if your cats are really stressed, or your dog, if they're not sleeping with you and they want to, make sure that you find a way to support their emotional health outside of that. Whatever that might look like with play, having their own space, very comfortable, it'll all depend. Right. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, good timing with your cat.
Yeah. That's Tico. That's my rabbit killer. He's a beast and he's big. He's a big cat. He wasn't neutered when we got him. Yeah. And he was probably 2 years old when he showed up he walked into my parents' house during an ice storm. And my dad was like, what is this? And my mom, the attractor of animals, right? Not shocking. And he's so funny. They sent a picture and I was like, oh yeah, he's definitely not neutered. His massive head and this handsome boy. And he's like a little dog. He's the coolest cat. So
full panther.
Full panther. Oh yeah. Awesome. And he's a wild one. So, but he's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, let's get into some of the Q&A questions that if my questions come up in my head, I'll bring them up. This is a good one. A bunch of people asked about fleas, and I haven't noticed that as much up here in the north as I did in the southwest. Yeah. I know at Petco, PetSmart, usually I forget is it Advantage or something? I forget the medication.
Frontline. Yeah.
It's like
the topical.
Hold them down. You put it behind their head, right on their neck.
And then you can't touch them because it's toxic. And right. Yeah. So fleas and ticks. I have a very strong opinion about a lot of the medication, the conventional side of the medications. For one, there's actually a lot of studies now that show the environmental contamination of those topical products. They're finding it in bird eggs and the wildlife. It's a big problem. And it's super toxic to the environment, of course, right? It kills the fleas and the insects. That's what it's meant to do. So not good for it to get into our wildlife. The other issue is that it's not new because it's been around for a long time. It's a newer class of flea and tick products called isosazolazines. So these are things like Bravecto, NexGard, Credelio, Simparica. The problem with this class of drugs is it's a neurotoxin. So supposedly it wasn't supposed to impact our pets and it's supposed to be safe for our pets. But the problem is it wasn't. And so there's an FDA warning. I believe it was put out in 2000 and I wanted to say, I think 18 is when it came out. So because it's a neurotoxin, it's now leading to things like seizures, liver failure, and death. So this is where fleas and ticks, yes, I know there's a lot of tick conversation around Lyme and all sorts of stuff. And Lyme disease, we can go into that too. However, the risks do not outweigh the benefits. And we have so many natural repellents that can help that I would never recommend usage of any of those. Now, here's the problem. People want to kill the fleas. They don't want to see them, right? But the problem is when we're using an insecticide, it's killing the pet and the thing, right? And you might say, I've given it, it's fine, my pet's fine. However, it's that long-term accumulation, but also all the other things that your pet has to deal with. We live in a toxic world, and so it can build up over time. And that next dose may be the last thing that you have to give before it like essentially breaks the body. We don't want to get there. And I've seen that happen with patients where they were perfectly healthy, received one dose, and their pet went into liver failure and died. Like, it is very serious. And after experiencing that personally with a client, I did not give it, thank God. I was trying to help her through that. But the problem is I won't touch it. I don't recommend it. It's just not worth it. And so using your natural repellents, though, is we have to shift the mindset of how it works. They're not as strong, but that means they're safer, and you have to layer the different repellents on. So there's like little tags too you can use and attach to collars that'll actually repel, which is pretty cool. Like energetically, you can use like amber collars. You can use garlic in the food. Garlic is not toxic to dogs or cats. The study where they did the toxicity, and everyone references it in my vet field, they like literally put like a cup and a half of garlic cloves and nasogastric tube the dogs. Yeah. Like the dog wouldn't eat that, right? There's no way a dog would eat that amount of garlic. They tested the blood work, and they saw that they were concerned that there might be an increased risk of bleeding. Dogs were not bleeding. They just thought it might happen, right? So it's not the reality of what's happening here. And we're not using those high dosages. So that just tells me we have a really high safety range. So this is where you can also crush up a little, like a cat, half a clove of garlic, and use it a couple times a week in the food. Don't do that when you're trying to transition, though, okay? They won't like it. So cats, once again, cats are cats. It'd be really hard for cats to probably want that.
Yeah.
You can use products, though, that have it where it's kind of layered in with other herbs that have natural repellent properties like neem and things like that. You can also use neem oil topically. There's a lot of sprays that also combine neem oil, essential oils, things like that too. So we have a lot of great products that work really, really well, that are safe. You just have to shift the mindset of like, this is a repellent. You still have to check for fleas and ticks. And if you find them, it doesn't mean it's not working. You just have to be more diligent. So that's kind of my thoughts there.
That's awesome. That's fascinating about the garlic.
Oh, I hate this study. They keep referencing, and I'm like, really? No one died. No one got sick. And you also did something really unnatural.
Yeah. So do you share the same sentiment with the, I forget the major compounds, like antiparasitics at Petco, PetSmart, the big stores?
Like the topicals? Like
the oral anti-parasitic ones, because I know now it's trendy in human health, for cancer and viral infections.
Oh, like the fenbendazole and things those, like that, and like ivermectin. So on the flip side, your heartworm prevention, because that always, like, the three of them come together. Your heartworm prevention, there is a lot of resistance out there. Heartworm scares me more because it can kill your pet. Like it is, and especially cats, it's deadly. Now, cats don't have a good option. And it's one of those things too. A lot of indoor cats, they're not as high of risk, right? They say, yes, we can see mosquitoes in the house. Is that one mosquito floating around heartworm positive? Probably pretty low risk, right? So it is one of those things that we just are thinking about. But with dogs, if you're in a high risk area, you see his massive head. So
it's huge.
You see his back end now. Cats. But in terms of, what was I saying? Sorry, cats are distracting.
Heartworms.
Heartworms. Like heartworms focus. So in terms of using heartworm in a high-risk area, that prevention, when we look at those drugs, using one that's like Interceptor, so your ivermectin-based products are going to be typically better tolerated, especially with breeds that can have a genetic predisposition to reacting improperly. So MDR1 mutations are a big risk with like collies and things like that. So using a specific brand is much safer for these pets. Now, the other thing too with that drug is that it lasts 55 days. It's treating the last 55 days. It's not preventing anything. It's treating. So the terminology we use is a bit confusing. It's not entirely correct. So this is where if you have to use it and you're in a high risk area, say like Texas, Florida, then giving it every 45 days during those periods of time is what I would do, and also support detox pathways. That's how I approach that with that situation. So I'm a little bit different with my personal beliefs around that one, just because heartworm, we don't want to mess around with. And you need to be testing once a year too, to check for heartworm. So that's the other thing that your vet should be doing. And if you're not using heartworm prevention, just check at least twice a year, because the life cycle, you're going to pick up on the life stages where you can still treat it with the preventative, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. You're catching it before it becomes into a later stage, which then requires your melarsamine injections and the really strong medications that we don't want to have to give. So that's kind of that, it's a little bit different, but a little bit more proactive approach with definitely HeartGuard or heartworm prevention.
Interesting. Have you ever experimented with methylene blue? Because that's come up in my research with lava and UTIs, that I guess that's a treatment for it. And it would be so easy to dose. I guess it would make his mouth blue, but if I just added it to water.
Yeah, I don't have any personal experience around it. I think it's something interesting to explore, though. I just don't have any personal experience with it. But it doesn't mean it wouldn't work. So
yeah, I've thought about dosing them as a preventative thing. I mean, it's so cheap and liquid, just add it.
Yeah. He'd just be like blue.
Yeah. Yep.
Be entertaining. Yeah. I'm not sure like side effects and things like that, but there's so many different like things out there that we could potentially tap into, right? I just don't have personal knowledge and experience around using it.
Funny question. I always get one or two, and this is just something to laugh at. They said, talk to them about that kibble you feed your cat. That kibble is killing a lot of cats.
Well, I think we covered it, right?
Yeah.
Gave you some tips. We'll see how it goes, right? The cats will dictate the transition.
Exactly.
But the kibble, it's a very like nutrition in the pet world. Like if you ever want to start the next like world war, just talk about pet nutrition. It's like the craziest thing. It's like, so everyone's so opinionated.
Emotionally charged.
Yeah. It's insane. And I'm like, it's like it's not actually animal, it's human food, right? The kibble is actually animal feed, their pet feed versus human food. So there is a difference there too with the processed food diets and the ingredients that are used. So, a lot of I didn't realize that as a veterinarian because they don't really explore that in vet school. I just had no idea. So until I got out into the real world and realized what was happening.
I follow like Indiegogo and Kickstarter. I just like new technology, especially as it relates to health stuff. And there's a company that recently came out, and I don't know if it's the first one, but it's a refrigerated wet food cat feeder
I know what
thing.
You're talking about.
And it like rotates on a timer.
Yeah.
But I had them on different foods. So I'm trying to figure out if I can get them both on the same food, which I should be able to with your tips that you shared. That would be more convenient, because then potentially if I get away from the buffet, the all day buffet, then I could only use that, and that'd probably be optimal for him, and just set it on a 3 times a day schedule or 4 times a day, whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it's great. I've seen that. I haven't used it personally because we work from home a lot, so I haven't had to use it. But yeah, it's definitely, if you use it, I definitely want to hear how it goes.
Yeah, I used it for a couple months. I didn't have any issues. It seemed pretty good. Yeah, it was definitely convenient because it's like you just prep it, 6 servings and just let it do its thing. But
that's cool.
Cellular hydration for cats, and maybe if you want to mix in their dogs too. But I remember when I brought in Lava, the vet was saying that distilled water is something that I should do, and for the minerals, because the minerals would contribute to the stones. And I didn't want to get into it with them with the deuterium depleted water that I give them, which is a super biohacking thing that's kind of really expensive. It's like $22 a bottle from Russia, where it's lighter hydrogen isotopes. That it's an anti-aging thing. It's a cancer treatment and prevention thing, and it helps basically the mitochondrial function. That's kind of been my like number one thing that I'm doing for my cats. So like
the water,
ozonate it, put it in their little fountain, and they're getting the ozone's more to keep it clean because that dissipates pretty quick, but at least
Yeah.
they're depleting the deuterium in their body, which I think is kind of like next level cat and dog health, or any pet health for
Any,
that matter. But
yeah.
yeah, curious your thoughts on the mineral content of water, because he kind of kind of almost got into the vet with it because
He doesn't think
uh
it's a problem,
well,
or
what was he saying? He was like, they'll basically drink whatever's available. So like if I'm in the hot tub, they'll drink that. If I'm in a bathtub with magnesium, they'll drink that,
yeah,
and they kind of like drink from different sources.
yeah,
But currently, I don't have a lake anymore. So they only have that fountain as a source most of the time. And
yeah,
that's essentially distilled water. But yeah, it's a big topic of hydration and water around cats and dogs. And I'm
yeah.
sure it's another emotionally charged topic where, people say spring water is better, no well water, no RO distilled, just
Yeah,
all
it is.
the
It is definitely a huge topic. I think the biggest thing that is important in my personal opinion is just like getting away from like the tap water, but also
Mhm.
too, each area is so different with like the
Yeah.
minerals that are part of water,
Yeah.
and it can contribute to crystals 100%. So if
Mhm.
you're able to like clean up the water and help them in the way that you are, it can make a big difference because most people are still giving tap water and it's contributing greatly to the urinary tract problems we're seeing with cats. So, I mean, not only are they
Sure.
feeding like poor quality food, but then you're also the water's the problem too. So, if
Yeah.
you can clean up water, I mean, it is a really important foundation. So, you know, I
Yeah.
I don't have all the knowledge that you have around that type of water source for just full transparency, but I water is a huge source of creating like health issues
Yeah.
or
Yeah. There's
can be.
I used to use EWG tap water database, but there's a better one I found recently. It's like a my tap score, and you could put in your city. So it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
citywater.mytapscore.com,
Awesome.
and it'll show basically a read. I'm actually testing my well that I recently dug, just a comprehensive to see everything in it.
Yeah.
It was like $1,000. It's full, but it's going to be feeding my bunker and everything. So I want to
Yeah.
make sure what's in.
Yeah, you wanna make sure it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that good tip with the tap water. I think that's probably the most practical priority, and then from there,
And
sky's
then
the
your
limit.
food.
Yeah.
Yeah, like your water definitely because it's gonna be easier because your cats are gonna like they need water, so they're
Yeah.
gonna drink it. Whereas like the food is a much harder transition, especially with cats, or it can be. But it's awesome to know about that resource because yeah, I mean, our tap water is already like messed. Like I mean, people they're spraying like.
Yeah.
So we have like over I think 12 carcinogens in our tap water here when we look
Mm,
at just
wow.
DWG. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Like, I think they're just trying to kill us here. So, like, in reality, why am I here, Matt? Like, why am I not moving to the mountains? Like, right? I built my bunker in my cabin. Like, what am I doing with my life?
That's a big reason why I moved up to North Idaho. Like clean air and water was my
Yeah.
top priority, and guns, but clean air and water.
Yeah. Colorado is not super pro guns here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're not pro a lot of things. So, well, depends actually. You should be careful with what I say. But I mean, you've got the thing though that you do have up there because we get it here every summer is the wildfire smoke though too.
Yeah.
Like that's the
Sure.
horrible part of it, right? Like and wildfire smoke is super toxic. So I don't
Yeah.
know if how long have you been 2 years you've been up there?
About 5 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
5?
Yeah. One year was really bad and it really messed up my chickens.
Mm.
But being on grid, if that ever happens again, the cool thing is I could shut them down, lock
Oh,
them in,
neat.
run an air filter. Because
Yeah.
I know a lot
Wow.
about air filtration. And yeah, it's nice to be on grid, not off grid. You have a lot more options
Yeah.
for things. So,
Yeah.
um, are you a fan of organ meats for cats and dogs? Someone was
Oh,
asking
yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
So
cool.
here's where, like, so raw food, right? Raw food, when we talk about raw food, it's not, I should clarify because this is super confusing when people are first getting started with like a species appropriate diet. They think raw food is like, I put down a piece of chicken and my cat eats it, right? That's not what we're talking about here. I'm talking
Yeah.
about balanced raw food diets where it's You have your raw meat, you have a bone source that could be a raw meaty bone. It could also, and then also you have your organ meats. And then with dogs and cats too, we need a little bit of fiber. I also like the phytonutrients with vegetables and fruits too. Once again, we have a lot of different camps in the pet nutrition world. And there are some people that are like, no, never feed that. We have so many studies now that show it, and it just makes sense too, to support cellular health and support,
Mhm.
just overall health. So that's really, really key when we're using organs. If we're using it, so like for my own cats, I'll use freeze dried like organs for treats, like little bits of for snack, but I'm not overdoing it. Cause once again, it's just like us, right? You can eat something that's really, really healthy, but you can still overdo
Yeah.
stuff, right? You don't want to just put down a slab of liver and away we go. So we just, once again, everything like typically we're looking at 80-10-10. So 80% meat, 10% bone, 10% organ meats. That's kind of the general guidelines. We can break it down a little bit further and add in, some veggies and things like that. Cats love umami flavored stuff. So ghee, like butters. You can actually cook up a bit of like medicinal mushrooms and a little bit of ghee, and a lot of cats will eat that.
Oh.
So there's a lot of different ways. I always say, we've talked a lot about cats. Dogs are going to be more open to trying a lot of stuff. So put that in their food. Variety is really helpful for supporting the microbiome, feeding the microbiome. But cats too, let them try different things. Like our cat the other night wanted to eat some of our asparagus. I was like, here you go, buddy. I think it's because there was ghee on it, but like, it's things like that. Let them try it. Some cats will eat like arugula. Obviously, they are not an omnivore, but let them try the different things, because that's also a source of environmental enrichment. But those foods can be, if you're feeding healthy foods, it can actually optimize health too for them.
That's awesome. I have like gallons of ghee. I eat it every day. So I'm going to start using
We
that
love
on.
ghee.
Yeah.
He's awesome. Cats love it. Don't leave it out. They'll eat it all. Like,
Wow.
but cats will like, if you put butter like on the counter too, it's funny. You go to bed and like, you're like, what is that on the side? The cat's like chomp like a
I've
side of the
seen
butter off. Yeah. So
they're like spoons. I see them licking the spoon.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They love that flavor. So it's also a way to, here you go, your transition.
Mhm.
Maybe use a little bit of ghee to get them to
Cool.
eat some of like the food that you want them to feed, like that you want them to eat.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Not too much. You don't want diarrhea. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
so.
Whenever I do my heavy cream or half and half or whatever I'm doing for my coffee, I have a little shot glass specifically for Lava, and he just takes, a few
Yeah.
sips, but he
Yeah.
he loves it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's perfect.
um, Arthritis prevention. This might be a huge topic, but I guess
Mm.
both for cats and dogs. Like, I mean, my brain always go for humans. It's like magnesium, K2, grounding. As far as the inflammatory part of it. But I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny. So my brain goes to like the foundational, like the nutrition side, right? I think it's because I see so many times like people are looking to add supplements and other things when we haven't gotten the nutrition
Mhm.
solid.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And like the nutrition is potentially creating inflammation in the body. So, and it's also not providing those nutrients, like you mentioned, that we need for optimal like bone development and like preventing inflammation. So that would be my biggest thing I'd want people to like focus on, and then look at how do we add in superfoods that are going to be beneficial for the joints in whole food form. So those are things like canned sardines, like can you get your omega-3s up? A lot of pets are deficient in omega-3s, especially if they are on a kibble diet, because that omega-3 6 ratio is off. So we're actually like tipping pro-inflammatory. So that's really important, is are we getting enough omega-3s? Are we feeding like less inflammatory foods? And then also too, I find a lot of inflammation with pets long term, like their detox pathways just aren't working. So adding things like, if, making sprouts are so easy, like broccoli sprouts, using that kind of thing. And you can chop those up and put it in the food, mix it up. Cats will sometimes, eat it too, which is great. And adding in like teas. I use a lot of teas mixed in food also for both dogs and cats. So burdock tea is really helpful for your lymphatic system. Dandelion tea. So dandelion roots, really good. Using nettles is a great nutritive tonic too. That's really helpful. So using like getting creative on ways that we can add in kind of more whole food sources to help support overall health, but naturally reduce inflammation are kind of key things that I'd look at first. And then of course, there's lots of tools for if we do have, osteoarthritis or pain. We mentioned a few of them, especially what you just mentioned too. Acupuncture is really helpful, light therapy, your grounding mats that you mentioned, your peptide therapies, an amazing source. I've experienced that personally myself with like my knees and like running, healed my knee pain. So
Wow.
yeah, it was crazy. Absolutely. Like I was like, whoa, this is incredible.
Is that I'm not too experienced with it. Is that the TB 500? Is that one that helps or?
So what I did is I used the BPC 157. And so I like running half marathons, and I started doing them when I turned into an older person at 40. So, because why not? And my knees really, from playing like soccer in my younger years, like my knees, I know have some like damage, but it's incredible. I don't have pain in my knees now. So yeah, that one was
Cool.
yeah. And it's also too, there's studies with like cruciate injury tear. So ACLs. So cruciate is the same as an ACL. So dogs, it can be really common. There's a link to also manganese deficiency, which is commonly low in kibble fed pets. So using those peptides versus like jumping straight into a massive knee surgery can actually help avoid knee surgery for a lot of dogs, which is really cool. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Have you ever played around with like cod liver oil? Like I've been using this stuff from Norway, and you can buy it liquid or capsule. Rosita, great brand. But I was thinking maybe pouring that on would help. If like you said, the omega-3 thing, because
So you can use cod liver oil. You have to be a little bit careful with pets because even though it's a whole food source, the vitamin D aspect, like pets can be really sensitive to an overdose of vitamin D. So it depends on like especially if we're using, say, like a kibble diet where there's synthetic forms of the vitamins and minerals, right? We probably both recognize and agree that whole food sources are better metabolized by the body, right? And we like get rid of the excess when we don't need it. It's much harder to overdose on whole food versus synthetic. It's okay if you disagree. You can disagree too. I might be wrong with that, but that's my personal experience.
Yeah. I've dove into that. It's definitely more of a balancing act. It's possible, but it's more of a balancing act when you're using the isolated forms for sure.
Correct. You can do it 100%, but a lot of people don't know how to do it and they screw it up, right? So especially in the pet world. So a lot of people add cod liver oil in, but they're already feeding a food that's potentially already at the high end of vitamin D. Like we've had numerous recalls that have killed pets with kibble, like vitamin D recalls. So I'd be a little bit hesitant, like until you transition over to like a more whole food diet. And then also too, like this is where using more of like your omega-3s by itself would be something I'd look at. So it wouldn't be bad to use every now and then, I would say. I wouldn't use it daily though. That makes sense.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Any first aid things that you keep around for cats and dogs?
Yeah, definitely. I have an entire first aid like free guide on my website.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is where like bleeding, right? Bleeding is a huge concern, like ripped toenails for dogs, like you can bleed very profusely, cat bite abscesses, right? Things like that. So powdered yarrow, the herb is a natural anti-bleeding agent. So if you're like, and you can use it for yourself too. If you have a wound, you can pack it with yarrow and it'll help stop the bleeding. The other thing too is, diarrhea, right? Everyone's going to experience their pet with diarrhea at some point. I always recommend you want something like psyllium to have on hand, but also binders. So you probably already have, imagine with your supplement line, like your binders are very powerful at helping to stop that. Simple, easy ones for people just ease of access. Activated charcoal is a good one to have on hand for like toxins. Super cheap, super easy to use. Keep in mind your pet's stool will be black if you're using a black activated charcoal. That is normal. So it freaks everyone out if they don't recognize that or are aware of it. So that would be something to have on hand. There's a couple homeopathy remedies. I am not trained in homeopathy for like chronic health conditions, but there's some acute homeopathy remedies that are really important and easy to give to both dogs and cats. Nux vomica is a really good one for vomiting. So if your cat or dog is acutely vomiting, you can actually give them the little pellets. Cats, an easy tip is have a syringe, put like two pellets in the syringe with water, shake it up, let it dissolve, put a with their mouth. Obviously, you can squirt it in their mouth, put a drop on their paw, they'll lick it off. So very easy to use. So Nux vomica, and then Arsenicum album for like, it's kind of like food poisoning symptoms. Like it's coming out both ends, right? Like obviously if your pet is sick and you're concerned, take them to the vet. There's my disclaimer. Like you're never wrong to go to the vet. Just important, trust yourself. But Arsenicum album's another homeopathy remedy that can be very powerful and helpful in those situations too. And then green clay. That would probably be my final one. Like cat bite abscesses. If for some reason you're like, oh, and it pops, like then you can actually pack that with green clay. It's a nice antibacterial and it actually will help it heal much more quickly. Cool. So those are just a few things to have on hand.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely have to get my first aid cat cabinet stocked up because I left it at my old house. But
yep.
Yeah, I keep like ozonated olive oil in the fridge. One that my friend sells. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
For cuts and wounds, I use it all the time with myself here in the mountains. Let's see a few last questions here before we have to wrap up. Are you still okay on time for a few more minutes?
I'm okay. Yep.
Okay, sweet. Oral health for cats and dogs. Should we be brushing their teeth or?
Yeah, great question. As I mentioned, right? Everyone's got dental disease by age 2. So it's just like us, right? It's that abrasive action that's really, really key. The best way to achieve that is brushing their teeth. Now, getting them used to it is really key. So the sooner you start, the easier it is. The longer you wait, the harder it will be. So if you can get them used to it, a lot of times just taking a gauze pad, wrapping it around your finger and gently like kind of introducing it, start with just one side, 5 seconds, next day, other side, like building up to it, especially with cats. Now, if you notice that the gums are already inflamed and red, don't brush because you're just they're going to become more opposed to it down the road because it's going to be painful. So if you're seeing that or you're seeing a lot of bleeding or anything like that, like gingivitis with people, you're like flossing and brushing your teeth, your gums are bleeding everywhere. Don't continue it because they won't enjoy it. And then you're going to create an aversion to it in the future. But brushing the teeth is really important. Soft bristled toothbrush, like a child's toothbrush is perfect for that. There's actually a cat toothbrush that's made specifically for cats. Yeah. And it's from Ryer brand. So that's something to try if you want a cat specific option. Otherwise, just a soft bristled kid brush is fine. And then there are a lot of great natural products out there. Some that have like Manuka honey. You can even create your own with like coconut oil, a little bit of like baking soda, and just, it's that abrasive action. Now, like next level up, if your cat and your dog are eating raw food, raw meaty bones are actually really helpful. So what's happening as they're chewing, it's creating a hassle factor. So it's actually kind of like massaging the gums and it breaks off tartar. So my German Shepherd, Finn, we used to give him like chicken wings and like raw meaty bones. And his teeth were perfect. He didn't need a dental cleaning. I think he had one in his entire life.
Oh, wow.
So it's something like if you can get them to chew on things, cats, a lot of times if you'll hold the like raw chicken wing, they'll just sit and gnaw on it. So that's something to try with cats, definitely. There's like turkey necks, you have chicken necks. There's all sorts of great options for them to chew on. If you have what I call a gulper, where they like look at the bone and they swallow it, more so like dogs, really excited. There are actually devices that you can lock in the chew so they can't swallow it. So that would be something when you first use these things, monitor them because that's scary. If they swallow it, we don't need a foreign body obstruction because that can happen. And then your vet will tell you raw food will kill your pet. And we don't want that to happen either. So we don't want the myth to be pervasive and continue, right? So those are a couple of things that you definitely can look at using. There's also some products. There's a product called Teeth, TEEF. And it's like a prebiotic B vitamin that helps support the oral microbiome. which is pretty cool. And they just came out with a lickable version. So
Oh, cool.
for like cats, especially too, you can put it down. There's like a liver and a salmon flavored one, and they can just lick it. I mix it in the food. So you can put it in drinking water too, for both dogs and cats. So those are just a couple different options, kind of combining the different things. If you can do all those things, you're going to have a much higher chance of helping to avoid dental cleanings down the road, or at least minimize how many your pet needs to have.
Oh, super cool. I hope you have affiliate links or discount codes for all this stuff, because you're giving us a lot of resources.
Yeah, I'm happy to share them, Matt. Let me know I don't even remember what I've talked about, but I do have a lot of discount codes and affiliate links. So happy to share those too.
That's awesome.
Always good to save on these, right?
Yeah, you have all the tools. I've never heard of any of this stuff. It's super interesting. Do you like the dental sticks? Like I'm looking at the Ryer cat. These look a lot more advanced with like golf fruit and this crazy stuff I've never heard of. But I did buy the little cheap sticks, and my cats love chewing on them.
Oh, the silvervine twigs. Silvervine twigs are, they're awesome. I find like my cats sometimes lose interest in them, but they're really good to use and try. And they're attracted more to them than say like catnip, because it's really interesting, the biology around it. But so what was your question? I got excited.
I just, are they helpful for dental? I would imagine it does it strengthen their teeth? Does it also clean them?
The chewing. Yeah. So the chewing's also like kind of scraping, and also too, that hassle factor. So you're mimicking like how they would be if they were tearing like the muscles and the sinew and all the things like from a wild animal. Like, so you're working on the jaw and the strength of the jaw, right? Cool. If we don't it's kind of like humans, right? Where we've kind of like de-evolved with our dental health. Like if we're not chewing on harder things, like you lose that and your dental structure can suffer.
Oh, fascinating. Really cool. Let's see if there's any last. Yeah, we got to like I thought about 5% of the questions here.
There's a lot. There's a lot to pet care.
Pet allergies, food allergies. I was imagining that's gut dysbiosis.
Yeah, it's so very, very common. So your food allergies are not as common as a food sensitivity. So they're actually stimulating different parts of the immune system. So food allergy would be like, we think about, this is like an IgE response. It's going to typically be pretty immediate. Think about like a peanut allergy for people. Like if you have a peanut allergy, you do not touch peanuts, right? It's immediate. And so pets, what happens is because of like their microbiome dysbiosis issues or leaky gut, where we have that gut lining is inflamed, that immune system is being sensitive, it's reacting to things. We end up with food sensitivities. So your pet eats a food, you can see itchy, like because of the gut skin access issue, not issue, it's a good thing. But when things are out of alignment, not necessarily a good thing. So symptoms we're going to see are ear infections. They're licking their paws excessively. We can see hot spots. They're over grooming. Cats over grooming can be a food sensitivity. And if cats are scratching at their head around their ears, that's a typical spot for a food sensitivity, especially with cats. So that indicates, rather than like going and using like steroids, Apoquel, Cytopoint, all the immunosuppressive drugs, we need to do some testing to figure out what's going on with the gut so you can actually heal the gut itself, or else you're going to stay stuck and you're going to end up on prescription diets and immunosuppressive drugs for the rest of your pet's life. And they don't typically work well and they create more side effects. So definitely allergies is a big thing. I'm always looking at also supporting the detox pathways with that. Really, really key, because there's so much more inflammation. The liver's having to process, the gut has to also get rid of. And things can get backed up, and then it gets recirculated and has to reprocess. So once again, foundations, like we've talked a lot about today, is what do we need to remove, reduce? So how do we simplify? How do we get onto a more species appropriate diet? And then supporting those specific areas to help heal the gut and then support detox too.
Yeah, this was jam packed. I know I took a bunch of notes. I'm sure the listeners will as well when they listen to it. Yeah, thanks so much, Katie. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Your website is The Natural Pet Doctor. Is that right?
That's correct. Everything is The Natural Pet Doctor. So try to keep it super simple for people to find me on YouTube and online and social media. We also have a free gut health guide that also goes through a lot of the tests that we talked about, and links and resources, and more information too about brands, like food brands, specifically for both dogs and cats, from like more of your processed food diets to more minimally processed too, to help people get started, and even some like balanced recipes too, if they want to dabble in like raw diets and things like that too.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, this is exciting for me because I spoil my cats. I get, someone's made fun. Like my friends that were visiting, they said, I feel like this cabin was more for your cats than for you. And I said, yeah, that's right.
I love it. That's the way it should be. I love it.
So I'm definitely going to implement a lot of what you shared, and yeah, definitely experiment with the diet, because I do believe it's foundational, same as humans. So I love that part of your message, that you emphasize that. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, and two, like once you get the foundation solid, you don't need a lot of the other things. That's the beautiful thing about it, right? So, but yeah, you need help with any of that, just reach out.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, thanks so much, and stick around as we close out the show.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
For those that have been following me on social media for years, I always get comments that if I reincarnate, I want to come back as one of your cats, and people see all of the energy that I put into taking care of my two cats. They really live a really luxurious life. But after talking with Dr. Katie, I see that I was really neglecting them quite a bit as far as the food aspect. I mean, they're still indoor-outdoor cats. So up here in North Idaho, for at least 2/3 of the year, when it's not freezing and below, they're outside for at least half the day, basking in the sunlight on the deck, hunting rodents, hunting birds. And I think that's the most important thing with whether it's your cat or your dog, is allowing them to ground, get sunlight, and then hunt local critters in the environment. Then I would add water quality on top of that. Like she said, definitely not tap water. I take it to the next level. I ozonate their water with the Crucial 4 cold quartz ozone machine, and I ozonate deuterium depleted water. But even if you just ozonated the Mitolife filtered water, the 7-stage water, that's a huge upgrade. And the ozone is mainly just to keep their fountain clean. I use one called Elfin Fountain. I'm a fan of all the cat technology stuff out there. I think I mentioned to Katie the refrigerated Llama Tech device that I just got last year that really helps with feeding raw food to your cats, because you can have 6 servings, and if you have several cats, you just get multiple units, and it keeps it cold, and you could set it on a timer so it'll rotate and allow them access to raw food that stays cold. So that is one way to make it possible to get them off of kibble. I just loved her tips around feeding and how freeze-dried raw is way better than any kibble. I thought that was a great point that really set off a light bulb in my brain. And so I've been ordering hundreds of dollars of different brands. And usually we have one picky pet. You probably experienced that. For me, it's my female older cat named Lyra. She is so picky because she was on mostly kibble for most of her life. So like Katie said, they're used to the texture, and she definitely likes the dry, crunchy texture. So I'm trying all sorts of different freeze-dried brands. What's working pretty well for both of them now, and have for a while, it's the freeze-dried cat treats from Origin, Origen, and it's a combination of turkey and wild-caught flounder. So 99% animal ingredients, freeze-dried, and they'll eat that all day long. And so I used Katie's recommendation to crumble it up or even just put them whole on Steve's Real Food. I think it's synonymous with the Quest brand. On the front of the bag, it says Quest. And that one's working really well for lava. So I feed them the chicken one. The ingredients are chicken, chicken liver, chicken heart, chicken neck, raw goat milk, flaxseed, coconut oil, kelp, taurine, green mussel, salmon oil, inulin, chia seed, sesame seeds, and ground eggshell. I know some hardcore pet parents just make their own food, and more power to you if you have the time and energy to do that. I personally do not, so I'd rather just spend money to have somebody else do it for me. Is every ingredient that I just listed optimal? Do I want salmon oil in it? Not necessarily. But the awesome thing, like if you go to stevesrealfood.com, you can actually see the nutritional breakdown of the product. So it'll show the levels of vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, thiamine, riboflavin, the B vitamins. It'll show the minerals, how much calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, iron, copper, manganese, zinc, iodine, selenium. None of the conventional and even healthy conventional pet food companies do this. So when you go to Petco, PetSmart, those places, as far as I'm concerned, are just great for toys and not much else. Maybe if you want to get into aquariums and fish, that's great. My first job was PetSmart overnight stocking, and that stuff is just pure slop. And it's for people that are either on a budget and or don't really care about the longevity of their pets. And just wheels started turning. I mean, I've known this at a deep level before interviewing Katie, but the whole pet industry is so close to the big pharma industry of factory farming humans for profit. Same thing with our cats and dogs. And when you go to the vet, just like when you go to the doctor, they scare you. Like they scared me with lava. I don't want lava to die. You know, I'll do anything to prevent that. But they are so adamant. He looked me straight in the eye and he said, for life, lava has to be on prescription kibble. And he said that because they make a commission off of selling their brand when you go to the vet. They're actually getting a cut. So for it to be a moisture issue and for the vet to not tell me that and I have to hear it from a podcast guest, it's just really wild to me. It's such a scam. And it's time that we start investing more in our cats and our dogs, because it's not fun to see them come down with a serious disease. They can come down with diabetes, or I hear all the time dogs coming down with arthritis and issues like that. Just a raw food diet can really prevent a lot of that. And I do think the whole parasite issue is overblown, just like it is in humans. It's real, but it's overemphasized. The parasites that Lyra had, she was definitely eating some gnarly, decomposing critters on my property. And so obviously she's going to get worms, eating decaying birds and rats and mice and rabbits. But I would much rather just give them some antiparasitics ever so often instead of depriving them of their natural diet. Her 2 points about them adding methionine to the prescription diet and also not having enough protein. So it being pretty high carb and causing muscle wasting in cats. That was a light bulb moment for me as well. The first week after interviewing Katie, it was a lot of time and energy and obviously money trying to switch them over. And it's still a work in progress, especially getting Lyra off of kibble. But like she said, don't give in with the first protest and just keep at it consistently. And I really think certain technology like the Happy Llama Tech, that's the website, happyllamatech.com. I'm not an affiliate, but that's the refrigerated pet feeder. And if you have 2 cats, just have 2 of them, set them on a timer. And especially if you're not home, you're not going to listen to them whine, and they'll only have that option. So it's either they don't eat or they eat the Primo Quest Steve's, raw food. And that's kind of the solution that I'm using is if I get tired of the whining, I just leave the house, go to my greenhouse, and let them figure it out and realize that the food I'm offering is way better for them. So if you want to check out Dr. Katie's work, it's thenaturalpetdoctor.com. She's on YouTube and social media. Just a lot of great information about not only cat health, but also dog health. And speaking of that, if you want to hear her thoughts on dog health, check out my friend Vanessa's podcast. It's called Intentionally Well, and it's episode 70 where she interviewed Dr. Katie. And that's what actually inspired me to have Dr. Katie on my show. Just a little bit of information like I had to hear about the prescription diet, just nonsense circus, can save you a lot of heartache and headache down the road, preventing issues with your cat or your dog. So I hope you guys enjoyed that first official show of the year. We're back on track for a show every Friday, so stay tuned. I have some really cool ones scheduled for the next 2 weeks for you guys. I redid my website thanks to my awesome friend Jose. It's just a wizard with this stuff. You can find that at matt-blackburn.com. It's a great resource. Every podcast is now listed, going to get better with links and potentially transcription, which is already on YouTube. I pay to have my podcast transcribed on YouTube, but I might start posting that on my website here. Just looks really cool, so definitely check that out. And if you click the shop tab, you can see what's called Matt's Market, which is my recommendations basically for health products, which I'm constantly updating and vetting products. I recently figured out that scalar energy emitting devices are a complete scam, just using blinking LED lights. And there's just a lot of belief that goes into that. I had my friend Brian Hoyer come to my house and spend a day with me with his friend Alphonse. We had dinner, had a really great time, smoked a cigar in my greenhouse, and I showed them around my acreage and the different buildings I have, the bunker. But we talked about EMFs. If you guys haven't heard of Brian Hoyer, search Brian Hoyer Life Radio on YouTube and you'll find that episode. Just very grounded information on EMF mitigation. And what really grinds my gears is just the amount of money that people spend on quantum cubes and these devices. You know, they're always looking for a device first instead of supplements, which to me is the foundation. So the foundation, and you can't get this from food, you just simply cannot get enough ascorbic acid for food, even if you're a fruitarian. Vitamin C, also known as ascorbic acid, they're synonymous terms. Vitamin E, zinc, melatonin, magnesium, shilajit. Those are really the foundational EMF protectors. And if you're following me on my Instagram, Matt Blackburn, you'll see my daily coffee stories. When I'm making my coffee, I have a generally country song playing and a PubMed quote at the bottom. And lately I've been hitting the EMF topic pretty hard, just sharing a lot of information around the importance of nutrition and why that's basically way more important and measurable and more legitimate than a quantum scalar emitting device that I was using that I believed in. It was just placebo, I found out, for the last 7 or 8 years until I took my double barrel shotgun, loaded it with a couple slugs, and put this scalar cube in the snow, shot it open because it's bulletproof to a 22 or lower. But I started to really question, why did they make it bulletproof? Why aren't there any user serviceable parts? Why can't you get inside? Why aren't there access screws? It's to prevent people from looking inside. And so we're all still working on our brain. I'm right there in the trenches with you. Sometimes I make mistakes. And this was probably the biggest in years where I didn't properly vet this product, and they had a PubMed study, but it's just a simple pilot study. It's not controlled, doesn't really mean anything. You can't measure the actual field that the device is emitting because it's a non-quote Hertzian field that's not electric, it's not magnetic, it's not RF. There's no meter to measure what it's emitting. And so the owner's on record saying it's like love. You walk into a house and you could feel it's just full of love. You can't measure it, but it's there. And talk about marketing, right? I mean, I made a joke holding up Lava and Lyra's feces in my litter robot bag on Instagram the other day and said, I'm putting this on sale for $3,000. It emits a scalar field that goes 100 feet, and it helps with EMFs and all sorts of things. We could just say whatever. So with marketing, you just really have to be careful, look for legitimate science, and like Dirty Electricity has, obviously, like Kim Lear of Green Wave. I just am loading up this mountain with Green Wave filters. There's Stetzer filters. There's static filters. There's all these Dirty Electricity filters out there, and they all do the same thing. And they're all cause a measurable reduction in the field that comes off the wiring in the walls. That is legitimate. It can be measured. You don't have to believe it to benefit. You can actually measure the reduction and feel it, just like you can with taking nutritional supplements. You can't do that with a scalar or quantum device. So that's my rant there. I did add a cool product on my website a few weeks ago. It's called the Hyper Shell Exoskeleton. I haven't been able to use it much because it's been either icy or muddy, but come spring, when the ground's nice and fun to walk on, it's going to be really awesome to run around the property using these, which you can actually use for resistance, so it feels like you're walking underwater, or for long distance hiking, which climbing a mountain, scaling a mountain, really awesome. So I had been waiting for that for a couple of years. I follow some Kickstarter, Indiegogo campaigns, and it took them a while to create it, but it's finally out. And I have a couple of them. I think they're a really well-built product, and it's just really cool if you do backpacking or really long hikes. Why not take the pressure off of your joints? Speaking of Brian Hoyer, I also added another product to my shop on the website. It's called the Safe Charger. It is $75, and it pretty much replaces your Mac charger. So a lot of people use laptops or iPads. I also use it for little biohacking devices. You can use it to recharge the Infopathy device or the Apollo Neuro. He has two different versions, one with one USB-C and a USB-A, and then one with three USB-As and one USB-C that's a little lower wattage, but it's grounded is the main thing. So if you notice, all the Mac adapters that plug into the wall, they're all ungrounded. They don't have the ground on that device. And that is very bad. And that means that when your fingers are resting on the keyboard and it's plugged in, you're getting exposed to a field constantly. A lot of people work in coffee shops or just at home. I just see on Instagram, a lot of people are using a laptop versus a desktop like I use. I usually go up to my office, everything's hardwired and plugged in and grounded. But that's an exposure that adds up over time, and that's zapping your energy. So it's a $75 fix. It's not a $2,500 fix like with the Quantum Scalar Cube that's a ripoff. This is only $75, and it actually does something. So talking about priorities, supplements, the Safe Charger, Dirty Electricity filters, grounding sheet, rod to earth, these are priorities. Everything else, if you want to play around with energetic stuff, crystals, etc., it's all just extra. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but do the foundational stuff first. My brand is called MitoLife. You can find that at mitolife.co. As I just mentioned, the grounding sheet You can find that under the living tab. We custom made a 7-stage water filter. We have an awesome KDF shower filter. Again, back to priorities, because a lot of people don't have endless pockets of cash. So you really have to be careful where you spend your money. And I'm talking about things that really move the needle with a lot of different aspects of health. Then if you click on the wellness tab, you can see all of the supplements. I've been growing the line for the last 5 years since I restarted MitoLife. And the prices are just phenomenal. So after COVID, I think everyone spent their money during that event. And so I've lowered quite a bit of my prices. If you go to a health food store, up here we have Natural Grocers. Down in California, you guys have Sprouts. Wherever you go, if you go to the supplement section, let me know if you find a zinc that's $10, like the zinc carnosine that I'm selling now under the surplus sale. A lot of the time, the prices on my website are way better than the prices at your health food store locally. And your health food store isn't selling biodegradable bottles like my zinc. So you can throw it in the trash and you don't have to worry about adding microplastics to the environment, because the bottle and the lid break down in a landfill in a short amount of time, talking a few years versus hundreds or thousands of years with all these other bottles. So $15 beef liver, $25 elk velvet antler, $15 lithium, $25 jellyfish jolt. And a lot of these will last more than a month is the thing. So 180 capsules in a $15 bottle of lithium. A lot of people are pulsing that one. I just made a really good post on lithium orotate and its benefits, its unknown benefits being antiviral. But 180 capsules, I mean, if you just take one a day, that's a 6-month supply. That's $2.50 a month. When I was driving for Uber and Lyft and a cannabis delivery driver down in Chula Vista, doing demos at Costco for coconut water, I could afford that. I could afford, 20 times that. So there's really no excuses with supplements. And a lot of people make excuses that, they're overpriced and they're not as good as whole food, which is total BS. I will fight and die on that hill that you cannot get all your nutrition from whole foods. It's great foundation. Eat your grass-fed beef, eat the highest quality seafood you can find, eat the highest quality A2 raw dairy, raw milk. I drink a lot of that stuff. Of course, we need to eat food, but you can't get all of your nutrition from food. And I think even if you're growing it yourself, because you forget there's exposures, there's heavy metal exposures, there's chemical exposures. Unless you're living in a bubble, you're still getting hit every day. And if you travel, you're getting super hit. Like a lot of these biohacker influencers, they're just getting slammed with all sorts of exposures. And that massively increases your nutrient requirements, because metals compete for enzyme binding sites with beneficial minerals. And then you add in chemtrails, you add in microplastics, and we're just getting assaulted daily. And the RDAs are a joke. You need way more than the RDAs. We're talking grams of ascorbic acid, not the puny under 100 milligrams that the RDA is for ascorbic acid. That is nonsense, psychotic. You need grams, thousands of milligrams of ascorbic acid. You're flying on a plane, you're traveling across the world, you're sleeping in 10 Wi-Fi signals. You need a gram of ascorbic acid every hour. That's real EMF protection. It's not a lot of these devices. So that's my rant for today. Check out the MitoLife website. Check me out on Instagram, where I am most of the time. Facebook's kind of annoying, kind of boomer land. So I mostly am on Instagram. There's some cooler people on there. And really excited to be back in the swing of things. Pretty soon on my Matt Blackburn website, I'm going to add a little tab where if you want to be a guest, you can reach out and you'll be considered to be on the podcast. It's like conducting an orchestra. Don't take it personal if you're not responded to. I just have a certain cadence that I like, and having different guests on at the right time. So it doesn't hurt, though, to fill out the application there. That should be up in the next week or two. And I'll see you guys next week. Stay supercharged and go rogue.